Welcome to Office Revenge Hub. Sit back for today's revenge tale.
They called me unimportant, told me to my face that my work didn't matter, that I was replaceable, that nobody would notice if I disappeared. 2 years later, I made sure every single person in that industry knew exactly who I was and they couldn't ignore me anymore. My name is Sarah Chen, and for 7 years I was a data analyst at Pinnacle Financial Services, one of the largest investment firms in Chicago. When I joined right out of graduate school at 25, I was hungry to prove myself. I had a master's degree in quantitative finance, could code in 5 programming languages, and had spent my entire academic career preparing for exactly this kind of role. Pinnacle was everything I had dreamed of. Glass towers overlooking Lake Michigan, brilliant colleagues, complex problems that required real intellectual horsepower to solve. The kind of place where your work could move millions of dollars and influence major investment decisions. I was assigned to the risk assessment division, building models that predicted market behavior and identified potential threats to our portfolio. The work was intense but thrilling. I would spend days diving into data sets that most people couldn't even comprehend, finding patterns that others missed, building predictive algorithms that gave our traders an edge. My models were good, really good. Within my first year, I had developed a volatility prediction system that helped the firm avoid significant losses during a market correction that caught most of our competitors off guard. But here's the thing about being a data analyst at a place like Pinnacle. Your infrastructure, you're behind the scenes. The traders get the glory, as the portfolio managers get the recognition and the executives get the bonuses. The people who build the tools that make all of that possible were invisible. My direct supervisor was a man named Gregory Holt. Gregory was in his late 50s, had been at Pinnacle for over 20 years, and had the kind of entrenched mediocrity that comes from being somewhere long enough that nobody questions your value anymore. He understood finance well enough to manage a team, but he hadn't personally built a meaningful model in over a decade. His job was essentially to take the work his analysts produced and present it to leadership as if he had meaningful input. I didn't mind at first. That's how hierarchies work. You do the work, your boss gets the credit, and eventually you climb the ladder and become the boss. Standard corporate progression. And I kept my head down, produced exceptional analysis, and waited for my contributions to be recognized. They never were. Every model I built was presented by Gregory with minimal attribution. Every insight I generated was delivered to leadership as the team's work, or sometimes just as Gregory's recommendation. When my volatility system saved the firm millions, Gregory got a performance bonus and a profile in the company newsletter. I got a standard cost of living raise and a generic good work email. But I told myself it was fine. I was learning, building my skills, creating a track record that would eventually speak for itself. I worked longer hours than anyone else in the department. Came in early, stayed late, worked weekends when projects demanded it. And I became the person everyone came to when they had a problem nobody else could solve. The culture at Pinnacle was brutally competitive. People protected their territories, took credit for anything they could claim, and threw colleagues under the bus to climb the ladder. But there was also a strange camaraderie among those of us in the analytical trenches. We were the nerds building the weapons while the warriors got the glory. We complained about it, joked about it, but accepted it as the price of working at a top-tier firm. Around my 4th year, things started changing. Pinnacle hired a new chief risk officer, a woman named Victoria Brennan, who came from a competitor with a reputation for aggressive modernization. Victoria was brilliant, demanding, and had no patience for inefficiency. While she wanted the risk division to be more proactive, more innovative, more integral to the firm's strategy, Gregory panicked. His comfortable position where he coasted on his team's work was suddenly under scrutiny. Victoria wanted to know who was actually producing the analysis, who was driving innovation, who had the technical skills to take the division to the next level. And Gregory, who had spent years taking credit for work he didn't do, was terrified of being exposed as the administrator he actually was. So he did what insecure managers do. He started controlling information. When Victoria asked about the models we were using, Gregory presented them as his personal projects. When she wanted to know who had the skill set to develop new predictive systems, Gregory volunteered himself and a couple of the male analysts he played golf with. When she asked about the volatility system that had been so successful, Gregory carefully avoided mentioning my name. I found out about this through a colleague who had been in one of the meetings. Victoria had specifically asked who built the volatility model because she wanted to discuss expanding it. Gregory had said he had led the development with support from the team. Not a lie, technically, but not the truth either. I had built that entire system myself over 6 months, teaching myself new statistical methods and testing thousands of variations before landing on something that actually worked. I went to Gregory privately, told him I was uncomfortable with how my work was being presented, that I deserved credit for what I had built, that if Victoria was looking for people to drive innovation, I wanted to be in those conversations. He looked at me with this mixture of annoyance and condescension and told me I was being oversensitive, that this was how corporate environments worked, that he was representing the team, which included me, that if I wanted to advance, I needed to focus on the work, not on recognition. I pushed back, said the work was exactly what I was focused on, and that recognition for that work was how people advanced. He got irritated then, told me that my job was to do analysis, his job was to manage strategy and communicate with leadership, that I was good at technical work, but didn't have the business acumen or communication skills for higher level roles, and that I should be grateful for the opportunity to work on important projects and not worry so much about who got credit. I left that conversation feeling angry, but also doubtful. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just good at the technical stuff and didn't have what it took for leadership. Maybe wanting recognition was naive and I should just focus on doing good work. So I did. I kept building models, kept solving problems, kept being the person who made everyone else look good. And Gregory kept presenting my work as his own, kept getting promoted while I stayed in the same position, kept building his reputation on the foundation of my talent. Then, about 5.5 years into my time at Pinnacle, Victoria announced a new initiative. She wanted to build a comprehensive market prediction system that integrated multiple data sources and could provide real-time risk assessment across the entire portfolio. It was an enormous project, the kind of thing that would define the firm's risk management for years. She was looking for someone to lead the technical development. This was it. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. I had been building exactly these kinds of systems for years. I knew the data, knew the methods, knew what worked and what didn't. I put together a proposal over a weekend, outlining my approach, the resources I would need, and a timeline for development. It was thorough, detailed, and demonstrated exactly the kind of technical expertise the project required. I sent it to Gregory on Monday morning, explaining that I wanted to be considered for the technical lead role. He said he would review it and pass it along to Victoria. I waited. A week went by, then 2. I asked Gregory about it, and he said Victoria was still evaluating options. Another week passed. Then I heard through the office grapevine that the technical lead had been chosen. A guy named Brad Richardson, who had been at Pinnacle for 3 years and was one of Gregory's golf buddies. I was confused. Brad was competent, but he didn't have anywhere near my experience with this kind of modeling. I went to Gregory and asked what had happened. He said the decision had been made at a level above him, but that Brad was a strong choice, with good leadership potential. I asked if Victoria had seen my proposal. He said she had reviewed all the options and made her decision. I didn't believe him. Something felt wrong, so I did something I probably shouldn't have. I sent Victoria an email directly, asking for feedback on my proposal so I could understand how to be a stronger candidate for future opportunities. It was a gamble going around Gregory, but I needed to know if my work had actually been considered. Victoria responded within an hour. She had never seen my proposal, had no idea I was interested in the role. Gregory had told her that he didn't have anyone on his team with the technical depth for a project this complex, which is why she had selected Brad from a different division. I sat there staring at that email, feeling my entire understanding of my career dissolve. Gregory hadn't just failed to pass along my proposal. He had actively lied to Victoria, told her I wasn't capable, or blocked me from an opportunity I was perfectly qualified for. And he had done it to protect himself, because having me lead a major project would expose how little he actually contributed. I forwarded my original proposal to Victoria, explaining that I had sent it to Gregory and been told she was evaluating it. I was careful, professional, didn't directly accuse Gregory of lying, just presented the facts. Victoria called me into her office the next day. She was furious, not at me, at Gregory. She had looked through my proposal and immediately recognized that it was more sophisticated than anything Brad had submitted. She started asking me about other projects I had worked on, and as we talked, she began to realize the scope of what I had been building for years. She pulled up files, asked specific questions, and started to piece together that most of the significant analytical work credited to Gregory's division had actually come from me. She told me she was going to address this with Gregory and with HR, that this kind of behavior was unacceptable, and that I deserved credit for my work. She said she wanted me to lead the market prediction project after all, and that she would be making organizational changes to ensure proper attribution going forward. I felt vindicated. Finally, someone in leadership saw what I had been contributing. Finally, I was going to get the recognition I deserved. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in years. Then everything fell apart. Gregory had been at Pinnacle for 20 years. He had relationships throughout the firm, including friendships with 2 members of the executive committee. When Victoria went to HR and to leadership about what she had discovered, Gregory went into defense mode. He claimed I was exaggerating my contributions, that my proposal had been derivative of earlier work the team had done, that I was a solid analyst, but tended to overstate my role in collaborative projects. He pulled in the other analysts on the team, the ones who had benefited from staying in his good graces, and they backed him up, said that yes, I did good work, but it was always part of team efforts, and I had a tendency to claim too much credit. It became a he said, she said situation, and Gregory had the political capital to make his version sound credible. Victoria believed me, but she was relatively new and didn't have the institutional power to override the narrative Gregory was building. HR got involved, interviewed people, reviewed documentation, and ultimately couldn't definitively prove that Gregory had been misrepresenting my work. Just differences in perspective about collaboration and attribution. The compromise that emerged was this: I would be given a small role on the market prediction project, reporting to Brad. I would receive a modest promotion to senior analyst, and there would be new guidelines about work attribution going forward. Gregory would receive coaching on management practices, but would remain as division head. It was a complete betrayal by the organization. They knew what had happened, but chose politics over truth. I had been proven right, but was being treated like I had caused the problem by speaking up. And the opportunity I had earned was given to someone else while I was handed scraps. But the worst part came 2 weeks later, and I was in a meeting with Gregory and the rest of the division. He was addressing the team about the new attribution guidelines, and he said something I will never forget. He said that some people get confused about the difference between doing technical work and providing strategic value, that the firm valued both, but they were different skills that deserved different recognition. Then he looked directly at me and said that everyone on his team was important, but we all needed to understand our roles and not overestimate our contributions. The message was clear. I was unimportant. My work was just technical execution. Anyone could do what I did. I should be grateful for my small place in the hierarchy and stop reaching for things above my station. I sat there in that meeting, surrounded by colleagues who wouldn't make eye contact. And I felt something inside me go very cold and very quiet. I was done fighting for recognition in a place that would never give it, done trying to prove my value to people who benefited from denying it, done believing that working hard and being talented was enough. I finished that meeting and went back to my desk. I opened my laptop and I started planning my exit. Not in anger, though I was angry, not in bitterness, though I was bitter, in clarity. Crystal clear understanding that Pinnacle would never value me the way I deserved, and that staying meant accepting Gregory's version of who I was. That night, I went home and I took stock of what I actually had. 7 years of experience building sophisticated financial models, a track record of work that had saved the firm millions of dollars, even if my name wasn't attached to it, technical skills that were genuinely rare and valuable, and something I hadn't fully appreciated until that moment. I knew where all the bodies were buried. I knew which of Pinnacle's celebrated strategies were based on models I had built. I knew which executives had taken credit for insights I had generated. I knew the real story behind their success. I started by updating my resume, properly crediting myself for the work I had actually done. The volatility prediction system, the portfolio optimization models, the risk assessment frameworks. I had documentation, emails, code repositories with my commits, everything I needed to prove authorship if anyone questioned it. Then I started reaching out to my network, not frantically, not desperately, but strategically. I contacted former colleagues who had left Pinnacle for other firms, and I reconnected with professors from graduate school who worked as consultants. I joined online communities for quantitative finance professionals and started contributing insights, building a public track record of expertise. I also started writing. I created a blog under a pseudonym where I discussed advanced modeling techniques, market analysis, and risk assessment strategies. I didn't reveal any proprietary information from Pinnacle, but I demonstrated the depth of my knowledge in ways that would be visible to anyone in the industry looking for talent. The response was immediate and overwhelming. People I had never met started reaching out, asking questions, requesting consultations. My writing was getting shared in professional circles, and within a month, I was being contacted by recruiters from firms that competed with Pinnacle. One of those recruiters represented Meridian Capital, a rapidly growing investment firm that was building out their quantitative analysis division. They were looking for someone who could not only build sophisticated models, but could lead a team and define strategy, someone who understood both the technical side and the business implications. I interviewed with them and it was like night and day compared to Pinnacle. They asked detailed technical questions that let me demonstrate what I actually knew. They wanted to understand my approach to problems, my methodology, my vision for what advanced analytics could do for an investment firm. They weren't looking for someone to do invisible technical work while others took credit. They were looking for someone to be the visible expert. They offered me a position as Director of Quantitative Strategy. It came with a 40% salary increase, equity in the firm, and a team of analysts I would hire and lead. I would be presenting directly to the executive team and the board. My work would be attributed to me. My success would be recognized as mine. I accepted immediately. I gave Pinnacle 2 weeks' notice, professionally and without drama. Gregory seemed almost relieved when I told him. He probably thought I was leaving because I couldn't handle being put in my place, that I was proving him right about not having what it took for higher level roles. My last day at Pinnacle was quiet. No party, no send-off, no recognition of 7 years. I packed my personal items, turned in my laptop and access badge, and walked out. As I left the building, I looked back at those glass towers and felt nothing. No nostalgia, no regret, just anticipation for what came next. Meridian gave me everything I needed to succeed. Resources, authority, trust. I hired a team of brilliant analysts, people who reminded me of myself at 25, hungry and underestimated. I built the kind of environment I wished I had at Pinnacle, where talent was recognized and contribution was rewarded. Within 6 months, I had developed a suite of predictive models that gave Meridian a legitimate competitive edge. Our risk-adjusted returns were outperforming the market consistently. Our traders loved working with my team because we gave them actionable intelligence instead of generic reports. And the executive team was featuring our work in investor presentations and industry conferences. Then I started getting invited to speak at those conferences myself, to present papers at academic symposiums, to be interviewed for industry publications. I wasn't hiding behind a pseudonym anymore or letting someone else present my work. I was becoming a known quantity in quantitative finance, someone whose opinions mattered and whose expertise was recognized. About a year after I left Pinnacle, I was invited to speak on a panel at a major finance conference in New York. The topic was innovative approaches to market risk assessment. I prepared a presentation showcasing some of the work I had done at Meridian, carefully avoiding any proprietary details, but demonstrating the sophistication of our approach. The panel was well attended, standing room only, and sitting in the third row, looking increasingly uncomfortable, now was Gregory Holt. I hadn't known he would be there, but there he was, watching me present the kind of advanced work he had spent years pretending to understand. I didn't acknowledge him during my presentation, didn't change anything about what I was planning to say. I just delivered the best presentation I could, fielding technical questions from the audience with the expertise I had always had, but had never been allowed to display publicly. After the panel, during the networking session, people swarmed me, VPs from major firms asking about my methodology, academics wanting to collaborate on research, journalists requesting interviews. I was exchanging business cards and scheduling follow-up calls when Gregory approached. He congratulated me on my success, said he always knew I was talented, said Pinnacle missed having me on the team. Every word was a lie wrapped in a professional smile, and we both knew it. I thanked him politely. Then I said something I had been saving. I said that I had learned so much from my time at Pinnacle, that working in an environment where I was told I was unimportant had taught me to prove my importance in ways that couldn't be denied. That being invisible had motivated me to make myself impossible to ignore. He understood exactly what I was saying, that his dismissal of me, his blocking of my advancement, his insistence that I didn't matter, had been the catalyst for everything that came after. That his short-term success in keeping me down had created a long-term competitor who was now outperforming him publicly. He made an excuse and walked away. I went back to the conversations that actually mattered. But the real vindication came 6 months later. Pinnacle had been struggling. The market prediction system that Brad had built never worked properly. They were missing opportunities and taking losses that better modeling would have prevented. Their risk management division, once considered innovative, was now seen as outdated. Victoria had left for another firm. Gregory was still there, but his reputation had diminished as the division's performance declined. Then I got a call from a headhunter representing Pinnacle. They wanted to talk to me about coming back as Chief Analytics Officer. It would be a C-level position, reporting directly to the CEO, with full authority over all quantitative analysis across the firm. The salary being discussed was more than double what I had been making when I left. Now, the headhunter said Pinnacle had recognized that they let a major talent walk away, that the new leadership wanted to make it right, that they needed someone with my expertise to rebuild their analytical capabilities. Would I be interested in discussing it? I asked who I would be replacing. The headhunter said it wasn't a replacement exactly, but the role would include oversight of the risk assessment division currently run by Gregory Holt. Essentially, Gregory would be reporting to me. I let the headhunter finish their pitch. Then I politely declined. I said I was very happy at Meridian, that I was building something meaningful there, and that I wasn't interested in returning to Pinnacle, regardless of the title or compensation. The headhunter seemed surprised, said this was the kind of opportunity most people would jump at, and I said I understood, but that some opportunities are valuable because of what they represent. And returning to a place that had made clear my work didn't matter wasn't valuable to me at any price. I heard later through the network that Pinnacle had struggled to fill the position, that candidates they approached were either too expensive or not interested in joining a firm that was publicly behind the curve, that Gregory had eventually been pushed into early retirement as part of a broader restructuring. The division I had built from behind the scenes had collapsed without someone who actually understood the work. Meanwhile, Meridian continued to grow. My team expanded to 15 analysts. We launched a consulting arm where we helped other firms build their own analytical capabilities. I became a regular speaker at industry events. I was published in top journals and was approached by universities about teaching positions. 2 years after leaving Pinnacle, I was profiled in a major financial publication. The headline was "The Analyst Who's Changing How We Think About Market Risk." The article detailed my career trajectory, the models I had developed, the impact my work was having on the industry. It mentioned that I had started my career at Pinnacle Financial Services, but made it clear that my significant contributions had come after leaving. Several former colleagues from Pinnacle reached out after that article. Some congratulated me, some apologized for not supporting me when I had spoken up. One person told me that the article had sparked conversations internally about how many other talented people they had underestimated and lost. But the message that meant the most came from Victoria. She had moved on to a smaller firm where she was now CEO, and she sent me a note saying she had always known I was capable of this level of success, that she was sorry Pinnacle's politics had prevented it from happening there, that she hoped I understood she had tried to make it right, but that sometimes institutions are too broken to fix from within. I appreciated her message. She had been one of the few people in leadership who saw my value and tried to advocate for me. But even with her support, Pinnacle's culture of protecting mediocrity and punishing excellence had won out. It reinforced what I had learned. You can't fix a system that benefits from undervaluing you. You can only leave and build something better. I think about my 7 years at Pinnacle sometimes, about the models I built that no one knew were mine, about the late nights and sacrifice weekends working on projects that someone else would present, about Gregory telling me I was just a technical worker who didn't understand strategic value, about that meeting where he looked at me and essentially said I was unimportant. and I think about how completely wrong he was. Not just morally wrong, though he was that too, but strategically wrong by suppressing my talent instead of developing it, by taking credit instead of giving it, by treating me as replaceable instead of invaluable. He didn't just hurt me, he destroyed his own division's competitive advantage. The moment I left, all that institutional knowledge and technical capability walked out with me, and he couldn't replace it because he had never actually understood what I did. That's the thing about treating talented people as unimportant. You think you're protecting your position, but you're actually guaranteeing your decline. Because talent doesn't stay where it's not valued. It goes somewhere it is, and it takes all its contributions with it. My team at Meridian knows exactly how important they are. They see their names on the work they produce. They get recognition from leadership when they solve hard problems. They're compensated fairly for the value they create. And because of that, they're intensely loyal. They produce exceptional work because they know it will be appreciated, not stolen. I've built the culture I wished I had at Pinnacle. And the results speak for themselves. We're outperforming competitors who have bigger budgets and longer track records because our people are engaged, motivated, and properly utilized. It's not complicated. Treat talented people well. Give them credit for their work. Create opportunities for advancement based on merit. The same principles that Pinnacle violated are the ones driving Meridian's success. The industry knows my name now. When people talk about innovative quantitative strategies in finance, I'm part of that conversation. When firms want to solve complex analytical problems, I get the call. When young analysts ask for career advice, they're directed to my writing and my presentations. I am impossible to ignore, not because I'm loud or self-promoting or aggressive, but because I built a body of work so strong and so visible that it demands attention. Because I proved that the person Gregory dismissed as just technical could become a strategic leader who shapes industry practices. Now, I don't hate Gregory. I don't think about him much at all anymore. He's a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when insecurity drives leadership decisions. But he's not important enough to my story to deserve ongoing emotional energy. He was just an obstacle I overcame on the path to something better. What I learned from that whole experience is this: your value isn't determined by whether others recognize it. It's determined by what you can actually do. And if you're in a place that refuses to see your value, the answer isn't to fight harder for recognition there. The answer is to go somewhere your value is obvious. I wasted years trying to make Pinnacle see me, trying to earn credit that was rightfully mine, trying to prove I deserved opportunities I was clearly qualified for. And I got nowhere because the system was designed to keep people like me in place, while people like Gregory collected rewards for our work. The moment I stopped trying to change Pinnacle's mind and started building my own path, everything changed. I went from invisible to unavoidable in less than 2 years. Not because I suddenly became more talented, but because I was finally in an environment where my talent could be seen and utilized. If you're reading this and you're in a similar situation, being told your work doesn't matter or that you're not ready for advancement, despite clear evidence otherwise, listen to me. It's not about you. It's about a system that benefits from undervaluing you. And you have two choices. You can keep fighting that system, hoping it will eventually change. Or you can leave and prove your value somewhere that's capable of seeing it. I chose the second option. And 2 years later, the company that called me unimportant was begging me to come back and fix what they had broken by pushing me out. I said no, not out of spite, but because I had built something better. Something where my importance wasn't debatable, where my contributions were visible, where my name meant something. They can't ignore me anymore, not Pinnacle, not Gregory, not anyone in this industry, and that's not because I forced them to pay attention. It's because I built a career so successful and so public that ignoring me would mean ignoring one of the leading voices in quantitative finance. That's the best revenge. Not destruction, but undeniable success. Not proving someone wrong through confrontation, but through building something so strong that their wrongness becomes obvious to everyone. I'm Director of Quantitative Strategy at a firm that values innovation. I lead a team of talented analysts who are properly recognized for their work. I speak at conferences, publish research, and influence how the industry thinks about risk management. I make more money than I ever did at Pinnacle and have equity in a growing company. And when people in the industry talk about cutting-edge analytical work, they mention my name, not Gregory's, not Pinnacle's, mine. That's what happens when you stop letting other people define your importance and start proving it on your own terms. If you've ever been betrayed at work, you're not alone. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Office Revenge Hub for more powerful workplace revenge stories.